So the conversation we're having today is a culmination of 6 weeks, of a 6 weeks project that was undertaken by LéO and SEPA from June 1st until today, July 12th. And the theme of this, When Art Speaks, was informed by some very interesting conversations that had happened sometime last year with some of the people that, that are seated with me on this panel. I remember in October meeting Kwizera and another colleague of his in Turkey. I think it was at someone's bachelor party. And somehow, I don't know how, on someone's bachelor party, the conversation veered off to to art. And I was telling him that from the kind of work that we do at the Institute, which is identifying and nurturing young and emerging leaders, one of the lessons we've learned over time is that increasingly artists, and this can be as broad as we can define it, these can be musicians, cartoonists, and all the others, are playing an increasingly important role in our society as role models, but also as voices, you know, about very critical matters in our country. To give you an example of someone I think who should have joined us today but wasn't, Chris Ogon. I think Chris Ogon's cartoons are shared or perhaps seen by more people than the newspaper in which they are published, which is the Daily Monitor. Why? Because Chris Ogon, in a media environment that is increasingly censored from the center, but also from inside increasingly self-censored, there is very little criticism in the written word. So the spaces for criticism become cartoons. So that's why over time, I mean, today, if you ask people in the audience, majority of them will know what Chris Ogon has put out today, but they will not know what the headline in the Daily Monitor was. So we felt then that these artists occupy a very privileged position that they can leverage to speak out more about critical issues in our country, but also in our region and continent and the world as a whole. And if you broaden it to artists on social media, people like Kwiz-Era and Hillary and Rita, they have a significant following. And even beyond them, other very unique art forms. I don't know if you realize that makeup is actually an art form. You have a Ugandan artist like Mona Faces. She has an incredible following on social media, especially on Instagram. So these groups of people and individuals are influencing increasingly a bigger section of our society. And it's high time that we put the spotlight on them and really got to hear from them about these critical matters. So that's how the project was conceived. And then in January this year through to February and March, we had this back and forth conversation with SEPA, and that's how we agreed to undertake this project. Now the project is phased in 3 phases. So the first phase was the publication, which is the LéO Africa Review. So the LéoAfricaReview.com carried articles focusing on major artists, but also the kind of work they're doing and how it's highlighting important stories in our country. So we revisited David Kanje here and Andrew Kagwa. They revisited the murder of Susan Magara and what has happened a year or so later. They also did a feature on, of course, the individual Bobby Wine and how his art has brought him prominence, not just on the artist scene, but also increasingly now on the national scene and what that means going forward. But also, we featured some of the artists here, Kwizera, Hillary, and we had a few pieces of poetry and fiction. The second phase is what we're having today, the actual conversation, where we get to have our contributors, partners, art enthusiasts engaging with some of the artists we've profiled. And then the third feature will be the recorded conversation here that will be shared with the public, again, through the LéO Africa Review. And we hope from the debates generated there, it will give us an idea on what to focus on for the next project. So without wasting much time, as part of this project, again, we asked some of the artists we're working with to do a painting, which we're glad to commission today. So without wasting much time, I'd like to invite Regan again to join my panel in unveiling this piece of work by Hillary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
Maybe you can tell us briefly before we go into the panel.
I call this piece Beauty in Struggle. It's about the struggle we go through, but at the end of it all, we end up being victorious. So the struggle ain't only pain. We learn from pain. So let's break the chains.
Nice.